Hello, so welcome to today's episode of history, and we're going to be looking at the making of the Constitution. And part of the Constitution was the creation of the Articles of Confederation, as you should have read for the past 2 days. But today we're going to take a look on the page that says the Constitutional Convention. And the Constitutional Convention originally met to perfect the Articles of Confederation, but they decided to create an entirely new document instead. So we're going to take a look on what that means, what the Constitutional Convention even is, etc. So stay tuned. So what is the Constitutional Convention? Well, the Constitutional Convention consists of the nation's so-called best. Delegates or candidates from every single colony except for Rhode Island came to meet. Rhode Island is actually the smallest state in all of the United States even today. And all of the people who came to meet at the Constitutional Convention were men, and all of them were well educated. There were doctors, there were lawyers, there were merchants, farmers, former soldiers. So they didn't have a ton of diversity at the Constitutional Convention, which is a meeting to make decisions for the entire country. So they're not very well represented, and I think that you can think of a couple problems that might have caused. So several delegates played extremely key roles in the Constitutional Convention. Remember, the Constitutional Convention was a meeting to improve the Articles of Confederation, where they actually instead created the actual Constitution and did away with the Articles of Confederation. But the president of this meeting was George Washington, and he was there to keep the debates respectful. There were many people who had differing opinions on what the Constitution should have in it. What should the rights of the United States colonists be, right? So he was there to keep the debates respectful. Now then, there's an elder man, he was 81 during this time, named Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin was there because he was good at calming tempers. A lot of people during these debates got very, 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 very heated. And so he was known to kind of make people calm down, kind of diffuse the situation. And then there was another man named James Madison, and he's from Virginia. And he designed a plan for a strong government. He was the one who kind of had a lot of great ideas on creating a strong national government. And finally, there's a man named Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania. Governor is his first name, not his title, Gouverneur Morris. And he wrote a lot of the final draft of our current United States Constitution. It was a very hot summer with hot tempers, and like I said, James Madison had plans for making a very strong national government, and the government then has a lot of power to control what goes on in each of the colonies. Some people had a problem with that, and actually that's still a problem today that we have kind of a fight over in America is, should the government have a lot of power or should people have more power? So James Madison wanted there to be a very strong government with a lot of power, but a lot of people feared that if the government had a lot of power, that people would lose power, meaning people wouldn't really have a say on what goes on in America. It would all be in the hands of the government, and they didn't like that. So at the end of the day, they decided to do something called the federal system of government, and that means that the power was split. There was power in the national government, but there's also power within each of the states. Each state has its own government. So if you know, in California, our state capital is Sacramento, and that's where our kind of capital is, that's where our governor is, and so we make decisions for California kind of independently from the government, and the government kind of oversees everything. Now, our government is split into 3 different branches. The first one is the legislative branch, which is the branch that kind of makes laws. The second one is the executive branch, and that's the one that the president belongs to. And he or she, in the future, if we have a female president, would carry out the laws that the legislative branch creates. And the third branch is the judicial branch, which is settling arguments over the law. So that includes our Supreme Court. If there's a huge debate over what the crimes, how to settle crimes, basically, that falls under the judicial branch. So within the legislative branch, the branch that creates laws, that branch is the only branch that is made up of representatives from each state. And so now there was a debate of how many people from each state should be represented in the legislative branch. Because if you have more people, then you have more votes for your state, right, in making decisions. And if you have more votes from your state, then what your state wants would win in government and in creating the laws. So bigger states wanted the number of delegates to be based on how many people lived in each state. So bigger states would get more people in government to represent their states than smaller states. Now, obviously, smaller states had a big problem with this because they were saying that if the bigger states get all the legislative people to be represented from their state, then the smaller states would have no say. Their vote wouldn't really matter because they were the minority. Smaller states wanted each state to have the same number of votes. Everyone had the same number of candidates representing them. So after a great debate, Roger Sherman created this idea called the Great Compromise. Compromise meaning kind of meeting in the middle between the two sides. And he decided that the legislative branch should have 2 branches inside of it. One is called the Senate and one is called the House of Representatives. And in one of these branches, the delegate number mattered based on how many people were living in your state. And in the other branch, everybody had the same amount of votes. So they have to kind of come together to make sure that the laws reach a fair decision for representing each state.